So we're going to continue on then. Maybe I should bring a test back so people will pay more attention.
No, I'm pleased. No, I think you're pleased.
Because I can see without a test, nobody even listens, right? Everybody is doing their Facebook or writing papers for other classes, or I don't know what's going on. But it doesn't seem to be this class. Okay. We're going to go ahead and continue on. I think we did this one.
That one too.
We got sound effects. We did that one as well.
Yes, sir.
And we did this one.
This one too.
And we did that one.
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's talk now about the Iron Curtain speech we mentioned. And I think maybe we ended with this.
Isn't that where Ronald is? This is I think this is where we ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so now I want to talk about the Cold War, Germany's role in that, and Berlin's role in the Cold War. One of the things that we see happening here is called the containment policy. This becomes a policy of George Kennan and is picked up by Secretary of State Dean Acheson. The idea here is that communism wants to expand. Communists want to expand their power over the world. This was the basic belief. And therefore, what the United States needs to do is to contain communism. That's why it's called a containment policy. Since communism desires to spread, communist desires to spread communism around the world, we must find a way to contain it, to put it in a container, right? To keep it from there. So, to do this will then guide U.S. foreign policy for 40 years, roughly. Let's say, maybe a little more than that, maybe a little less, depending on who you talk to. But it's going to guide what we do militarily. It's going to guide what we do in foreign policy. This is the policy of the Cold War. So if you want to understand the Cold War, you have to understand the containment policy. All right. The United States begins to send military and economic aid to those who faced communist threats, at least in their opinion. So countries that faced communist threats. The spread of communism is often talked about as being like a rotten apple in a barrel. They used to ship apples in barrels, not boxes like they do today. And if you get a rotten apple, let's say in the center of the barrel, the one rotten apple will cause the apples around it to become rotten. Because as it rots, the fluid that it releases, the juice that it releases, sends the bacteria then to the other apples and then the other. So you might have a good looking barrel of apples on the top, and when you dig down in there, you got down in the center, a big bunch of them have rotted from the inside because there was a rotten one down in the center. This is the idea that communism's like a rotting apple, and that when a communist country is adjacent to other countries, it's going to infiltrate, it's going to ooze, it's going to corrupt the countries around it. And so foreign policy then goes, we're going to give money, we're going to give aid, we're going to give attention to countries that are near communist countries, especially in the hopes that they will not become communist. Yes?
Now, was the fear more that the people would start wanting a communist government, or that the places that already had a communist government would insert people into positions of power in the areas?
Well,
because from everything I've heard, it just seems like the people don't really want to be in a communist country.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much, they're not worried, they're worried about the influence. Let's say, for example, you've got a country like Greece. Okay, Greece is going to come up here in a second. Greece has bad economic times following the war. They got bad economic times now, but they had real bad times then. So during a time of bad economic times, communism is more appealing to people because communists will say, well, look, the government's going to pay for everything and it's going to take care of you from the cradle to the grave. And so you don't have enough money, you don't have anything, you don't have a job, so we're going to provide all that for you. So that kind of communist teaching or propaganda will find more listening in times when there's economic problems. Plus, Greece was very close to lots of other communist countries in the Eastern Bloc, and so it was easy enough for communist leaders, and people could be trained and sent across the border to help rally people together, help send out propaganda, so on, to help topple current governments. So the idea was the United States needs to bolster a country like Greece because it is next to communist countries and because it is strategically located as a kind of, keeping the communist countries away from the Aegean Sea. And so Turkey and Greece were both early ones that were targeted for U.S. help. So there it is. Greece and Turkey are sent aid in the March of 1947. And of course, this policy of containment is what was completely behind what is known as the Marshall Plan. That's what it's typically called. Its real name is the European Economic Recovery Plan, the EERP, but most people just call it the Marshall Plan because General Marshall of World War II was assigned this job to oversee the reconstruction and the economic recovery of Germany and the rest of Europe. And so he, as a civilian, will do that. So this all begins in June of 1947, about the same time, where $13 billion is sent to Europe. Of course, this is $13 billion in 1947, which is a lot more money than it would be today. And so General George C. Marshall will oversee this. Now, the Soviets see all of this as Western imperialism, and obviously, they don't trust the West. So let me get to the next screen. You can come back and take a look at this online if you don't have time to write all that down. But one thing we want to talk about here is what happens to Germany. We've kind of talked about this. I just want to make sure we're clear on it, that Germany gets divided. It gets partitioned at the end of the war because they wanted to remove the Nazis, denazification. And so, since we had four allies who helped defeat Germany, four allies divide Germany into four parts. The French, the British, right, and the United States, and the Soviet Union. And what happens is that three of the four allies cooperate very well, the French, the British, and the United States, whereas the fourth ally, Soviet Union, has a lot of tension with the others, and vice versa, and so they never unify. So this keeps Germany divided east and west, because the east part is what the Soviets had. But the city of Berlin becomes a microcosm, if you will, of the Cold War, because the German capital of Berlin is divided east and west. The three sectors, the French, the British, and the U.S. sectors in the west, are united eventually. The eastern part of Berlin is kept under the Soviets. And what basically ends up happening then is that the Soviets want to force out everybody out, all the Western allies, out of Berlin. This is what leads to the Berlin crisis and the Berlin airlift. That's just another map showing the sectors. But let me do this one, and we'll put this up here, and then we'll close after that. So the Soviets blockade everything in 1948. So we see from February of 48 to May of 49, there is an airlift where they had to bring everything in because the Soviets blocked any ground transportation by train or by truck. And so all the goods coming to West Berlin had to be flown in. And they are flown in 13,000 tons a day in cargo planes flown by the military. And we see ultimately then Germany divides. Yes?
One question. How exactly, if the Soviets were blockading West Berlin, then how exactly were Americans, British, and French, and West Germans even able to go to the city to begin with?
Well, at the first they weren't blockading it. At first they did keep control, but they had a train route you could take, and they had a road that you could take in and out of the city to the west. Once they blockade it, the only way in is by air. And of course, the only way for the Soviets to stop that would be to shoot the planes down. and that would accelerate probably into war. So neither side, this is why it's called the Cold War, there's a lot of conflict, a lot of tension, but there's never direct fighting between the US and the Soviets. And so after the end of this lift period, the reason it stopped is that the Soviets said, okay, we're going to allow ground transportation again. They have a controlled corridor for train and truck to be able to ship goods in. Yes?
Well, I kind of have something to say, but it can wait.
Okay. Well, we better end there. We're past time. I don't know where our other class is.
And that's it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Really, guys?